Hello and welcome to the Rugby Show here on the 42.ie. We're live in Journal Studios. Gavan Casey here alongside former Ireland head coach Eddie O'Sullivan. Eddie, how are you?
Good, thanks.
We made things difficult for ourselves over the weekend. A lot of lads got the opportunity to, I suppose, put their hand up for selection next week and beyond that. Probably not many that you reckon would squeeze into the team now for Argentina after a 3-point win over Fiji.
No, I don't think anybody kind of changed the coach's mind in terms of going forward for next weekend. But I think the purpose of the game was to see where his depth chart is. There's no doubt that they took a little bit of a risk because they knew this Fijian side was pretty strong. At one point it looked like they might have taken too much of a risk because they could have got caught. And I think they'd be disappointed that I thought at half time they'd set themselves up probably to kick on and win the game, and they didn't really get into that gear they needed to get into. But there were some positives. The first half I thought was a good first half. Bit broken up, but at the end of the day I thought we looked good in terms of our attack, but that seemed to dissipate in the second half, even with Joy Carberry on the field.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we want to know your thoughts obviously at home if you are tuned in, and we'd like to have a say as to who you reckon should be in the team for Argentina. Send in your comments for Eddie here. You mentioned Joy Carberry. He certainly looked the most inventive player in the field, which is probably no surprise. As you mentioned, it was a case of Ireland kind of slowing the pace, or Fiji maybe slowing the pace more so, even with Carberry on the field. So this wasn't a case that like he got taken off and Ireland kind of went to pot. They had started to decline a small bit.
I thought the first half he played really well, certainly with the ball in hand, and for a guy who's been playing most of his rugby at full back, to start a test game at 10 and to have the impact he had, I thought he was excellent. I think what Joe Schmidt was looking forward to see is this guy who's number 10 behind Johnson Sexton. I think on the evidence of last Saturday, he did nail that down. He had a hand pretty much in all the good stuff in the first half. His break for Darren Sweetenham's try was excellent, but I thought the pass off his left hand 15 metres full tilt to Sweetenham was almost better than the break. It was outstanding. And again, he had a phenomenal offload, and those little spot plays out the back and little wraparound plays that Jonathan Sexton does very well also. He looked really like a guy who was pulling the strings, and in the first half I thought he had a superb first half. Now defensively he tends to come out of his line a little bit at times, and I think that's a natural reaction for a guy who's not that big. When you're defending a guy who's coming at you who's bigger, you tend to get off the line quickly to shut down his momentum, but that put him in trouble a few times, and he leaked out of the line for the Fijian try just for half time. Didn't certainly help the defence. I know they got a lucky bounce, but that put us under pressure. But look, in terms of his attack, he was outstanding. But I have to say, in the second half, I felt at half time, as I said, we were in position now to kick on. If we kept that tempo on the game and kept those little rolling plays going against Fiji, I could see them making more and more mistakes. Like Fiji defended hard on the weekend, but not always smart. And if you're patient like that, you will get breaks. But in the second half, we just kind of lost our tempo. We went down a gear rather than up a gear, and we became a bit predictable and narrow as the game went on, and Fiji were able to cope with that, and that was a problem. And that was, to be honest, before Carberry went off, we kind of slipped into that mode. Yeah,
just to finish on Carberry, I suppose he is now the number 2 guy behind Sexton, as you mentioned. It's going to be difficult for anybody, be it Ian Madigan or Ian Keatley, to displace him there. But is it a concern, given what you were saying when we were sat here last week about excuse me, Robbie Henshaw playing 13? He doesn't play his club rugby there. You mentioned Carberry is playing predominantly a full back. To be a backup out half at international level, do you need to be playing 10 all the time?
Well, I think Joe Schmidt himself made reference to this in the weekend, because I think it is frustrating from that his number 2 fly half now is actually playing at full back regularly for Leinster, and Leinster feel they probably need him there, and Ross is a good number 10 for Leinster. He's worked out well, so I think it's something he'll probably be talking to Leinster about, see if he can change their minds a little bit, because there's no doubt what he did last Saturday was excellent, but for his own game he probably needs to play at 10 as much as possible.
Yeah, we all the talk, I suppose, going into this one, as you mentioned, was kind of depth charts. It's an American term that's crept into rugby in recent times, but I suppose Ireland, we knew coming into the game that we have serious strength and depth. Are there any players from in a position where like they're backing up consistent starters that you reckon have maybe displaced them now? Before we came on air, I know you were talking about, say, at Loosehead, you reckon Cian Healy's impact off the bench and his performance against South Africa as well last week maybe edges him ahead of his competitors now.
Yeah, I think if you stacked up the depth chart now at Loosehead, I think Cian Healy's probably number 1 on form, Dave Kilcoyne number 2, and I think Jack McGrath probably didn't do enough on the weekend. Jack McGrath didn't have a bad game, but I've seen him have more impact on the game. He maybe looked a little bit, I suppose, match rusty. But he didn't have that big impact, so he might find himself back at 3 now on the depth chart. Now, this is all our speculation. Maybe Joe Schmidt uses it differently, but just going on the form, I think Kilcoyne as well has been very dynamic for months of this year and carrying the ball. So I think that situation, I think the tight end situation, obviously Furlong's number 1. Certainly Ryan is number 2, I think, in the coach's mind. And he ported it very well in the weekend. He didn't have a barnstormer, but a young guy like him who switched to tight head from loose head, and actually did a very good job. I think he nailed kind of that down, and that's 3 in both those positions, which is good. I think Rob Herring did okay. He's certainly behind Rory Best, but I think Sean Cronin could feel hard done by here. I think he's a guy that's hugely dynamic off the bench. Okay, his darts at times can be a bit off, but I think on a balance he's something that probably brings more. Herring's a solid player, but it'll be interesting to see now that we have someone like James Tracy ahead of Cronin, and I think maybe that's the Leinster pecking order as well. Might work for Cronin, but again, there's good depth there. All those guys can play. The second row scenario, I suppose Devin Turner had a quiet game by his own standards on the weekend. He's always going to be there. Ian Henderson now looks like the debate of whether he's a back row or a second row is over.
Yeah.
He's now a second row, and he's proven that. So that's probably bad news for Ultan Delan, who had a decent game on the weekend, but I think James Ryan seems to be ahead of him on the pecking order, and I've no doubt that Ryan would have played this weekend had he not picked up an injury.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the back row, it's just insane competition. And I think the one guy for me that we know Rhys Ruddock's a great player and had another solid game on the weekend, even as captain, which is extra pressure on him. But I thought Jack Conan did very well on the weekend, really kind of threw a marker down, as he has been all year. But I thought Jordy Murphy found it very hard to make an impact on the game. And for him now, he's probably fallen down the food chain even further,
Yeah, there was probably a couple of guys like that where I suppose you wait a long time for a chance to come around again, and just for whatever reason you don't take it. Maybe just
sometimes the game can run against you, and it's very hard to get into it, and the way the game flows. But we've seen Jordy Murphy have bigger impacts in games for Ireland, just bring more to the party. He was very quiet on Saturday with the work he got through and what he got done, which is unfortunate for him because he's an international player. He's shown it before, So, but it's so competitive now in that back row. When you think about it, you've got Heaslip is injured. He's not back yet. But if you take the guys who are active at the moment, you've got Sean O'Brien, CJ Standard, and Peter O'Mahony. And then you've got someone like Rhys Ruddock backing that up, and Jack Conan pushing in there as well. It's a tough spot to find a place, and it's always been thus for Ireland. We've always been very lucky with our back row selections. We have plenty of options. Yeah,
do you reckon Conan put his hand up maybe for next week?
I think he did put up a little bit, but I think if he was to go through, maybe Rhys Ruddock loses out. That'd be a tough call as well, because I don't think Ruddock did anything wrong. Again, he had a good solid game,
And he was good as well last weekend as well.
Yeah, I thought he had fine. I thought he was superb when he came off the bench against South Africa. So, they're the calls that are tough, because whoever loses out genuinely loses out. It's not like it's one guy definitely over the other. But I suppose on form, I think Ruddock will hold it. But Conan certainly didn't miss his chance to put up his hand.
Big time, yeah. Conor Murray is, I suppose, a lock in this team. He's maybe the best scrum half in the world. Actually, definitely the best scrum half in the world.
Well, I think he is. Now, I might get criticised for saying that. I'm looking through green coloured glasses, but I actually think he's the best scrum half in the world. I know Will Genia is back on form with Australia, but I just still think Murray, for me, is he ticks all the boxes. He can play make, he can kick, he can carry. He's a good defender, I just think he's on top of his game. Now that means that I don't think ever is going to lose his place in the current form, bar injury. And I suppose the thing you're probably looking for there, I think, in the scrum half position, Kieran Marmion had a quite enough game for Kieran Marmion. He's usually very busy, very dangerous. Not as busy, and I suppose he'd be worried about Luke McGrath maybe jumping over him, which could happen. But again, Luke McGrath didn't get a lot of time in the field, and are not enough time to make a big impact. So I think Marmion certainly hasn't improved his position, but he'll probably hold it. But I don't think Conor Murray's ever under threat from him at the moment.
No, I suppose in an ideal world, maybe a game is going against Ireland, and you might have an option to bring on somebody who can change a game at 9 for the last 20 minutes or so. But at the moment, Marmion doesn't really seem to be maybe making the impact.
He has been very good. Especially for Connacht, he's such a lively scrum half that when a team is getting tired, the last 20 and he comes on the field, he can often catch defenders at ruck time and make serious line breaks, which can turn a game. But he was a bit quieter on Saturday, I thought, and a couple of times he went. Probably wasn't the best time to go. He might have been forcing it a bit. But look, I mean, he didn't light it up, but I don't think he's lost any ground, to be honest.
Yeah, fair enough. What about out the backs then? I suppose centres, firstly, we discussed them a little bit last week. Do you reckon, I suppose, maybe start with 12, Stuart McCloskey, did he improve his chances in any way?
I wouldn't say he'd improved his chances, because the two guys who played, like McCloskey and Farrell, they did what it said in the tin. They're two big strong men, and they carried very hard into contact. I think they found that international rugby is a notch up again, and the yards you make at provincial level are not as easily made at international level, and there's more pressure. I think McCluskey turned over one ball on an exit that he'd be pretty upset about, because he got a bad body position and the ball was gone before he knew it, and probably trying to make up for that, he threw a really loose offload into touch another time. But he still got through a lot of work. He'd a busier game than Farrell had, but I think those two centres didn't do anything too wrong, but they didn't light it up either, in a sense. They were very direct, but they were made head on by a very physical defence. And I think they're probably, if you look at the depth chart, the 12, I think probably Henshaw is 12, Bundyaki is 12, and I then think McCluskey comes in behind that 3. He'd be third down the chart, and then outside centre, I think Ring Rusby's fit. Payne is in that frame as well, and Farrell is down the chart. And it's possible that they would even juggle the top 4 guys around before McCluskey or Farrell will get in. So there's very good strength and depth there. But I think that's how it stands at the moment. Like, I think when Ring Rose comes back, it'll be very interesting. But I think himself and Robbie Henshaw are still the best combination.
What about full back then? It's probably the one area where we're not completely brimful of talent with Simon Zeebel's absence now. Yep. Maybe he might be brought back in future. We don't know, but
well, I think obviously Joe Schmidt has a lot of faith in Rob Kearney, and I think that's his number one choice when Rob Kearney's fit and well. But I think Andrew Conway did very well again there. He's a very good footballer. He can play in the wing as well, but I think he did a good job there. And I could see the possibility with the clutter of players in the centre, Jarrah Payne could slip back to full back, which, to be honest, I always thought was his best position, because he's a lopey runner, and that when you get ball in the backfield with a little bit of space in front of you and time to pick out gaps, he's very, very good at ghosting into spaces. So I think he could fall back into that very easily into that slot. So again, it's turned into a bit of an abundance of riches there, even with Zeebo off the chart, And then the wings, I thought Sweetenham was very good again. Like, the guy has just got better again. Earl still has to come in there. I still think Stockdale is still to come in there. Conway can go to the wing. We're still talking, like, Dave Kearney did a solid job bar that howler with the intercept, but other than that, you know what you get from him. He's a solid player, generally doesn't make mistakes, except for that particular one. He made all his tackles. He's an aggressive runner, and I suppose you've guys like Craig Gilroy, who's been out of the loop for a while, and you still have like Tommy Bowe, who's kind of rested now to an extent, and even Andrew Trimble, who if they're needed, they're guys who are still, potentially could come back into the play, so there's a lot of good positions there. So in terms of the depth chart for the whole squad, I think he has lots of options, and they have it has grown the depth of the squad. But at the end of it, I think there's certainly a 2-tier system there now, where you've guys who are genuinely could go in and start in the front line, and there's guys who are in the second tier. Big
time. Before we take a couple of comments here, do you reckon, if fit, it's maybe Earls and Stockdale are the starting wingers in an ideal world? Yeah,
just on the form this year, I think Earls has been electric, absolutely electric, and I think Stockdale, I thought they were the 2 best wings in the country by a country mile since the start of the season. At the moment, but Earls tends to come back. When he gets injured, he tends to come back and not have missed a beat. He doesn't come back and take a while to get into it. So hopefully we'll see him for the Six Nations. But on current form, I think himself and Stockdale are are two really top end performers.
Yeah, Roy Allen is on Twitter. He says, in my opinion, two players who harmed their reputations on Saturday were Marmion and Murphy. Not at their best. I thought Luke McGrath should have come on much earlier. So I suppose echoing your thoughts on Geordie Murphy there, it wasn't his best day. Do you reckon then there might be a kind of a swing? You did mention it there between McGrath and Marmion as to
could happen. I mean, look, Marmion probably needed to make a big statement on Saturday to solidify his place. The thing for Luke McGrath is he didn't, as the tweet points out, he didn't get on very early. He didn't get on early enough to make an impact, and maybe had he got on a bit earlier, maybe he might have had more of an impact. But I still think Marmion would probably edge it on. But again, look, we're speculating on the coach. The coach may had let Marmion just see where he got for the whole game, and already said, like, I'm still going to put McGrath next week. He could do that. And McGrath did very well last year in the Six Nations. He had a very good spell when he came off the bench for Murray in the last game against England, where he closed out the game. I remember one superb wiper kick into the corner in England, back into 22 at a crucial moment. So he's a very good operator. So I think Marmion will feel a little bit of heat from McGrath, although McGrath didn't get a lot of time to prove his case.
Looking ahead to next week then, Argentina, I suppose, traditionally are going to be physical. We saw them against England, maybe didn't light the world on fire, but neither did England. They at least put it up to them and made it a tough enough game. What are they going to bring to the table next weekend, do you reckon?
Well, I think they didn't really make any inroads in the Rugby Championship, but I wouldn't necessarily see that as a step backwards, because the Rugby Championship is a very tough tournament. I mean, of course, they lost all their games, but playing teams like New Zealand regularly and playing South Africa regularly makes you a better team. You know, and playing Australia regularly, but like, it just makes you a better team. I think Joe Schmidt, alluded to that, and he's right. Like a lot of times before Argentina, they wouldn't have played those sort of tough test games to harden them up. I still think they're a very dangerous side. I still think they're not afraid of anybody. Again, if you're put, for instance, up to the Tri Nations teams every year, you don't get too concerned coming to the Europe, and they've been here before. So I think they'll be a very difficult test for us. In terms of whether they beat us or not, potentially they could beat us, because they're a kind of team that stay in the game on you. And even, we know in the World Cup they hit the straps in that quarter final, and it was hard to watch. But even when they're not hitting the straps, they're hard to shake off. England couldn't shake them off in Twickenham, even though they dominated the game. And we forget that I think New Zealand or Argentina missed 5 kicks at goal in Twickenham, and England's try came against a yellow card. So I think they're a lot better than people think. I think they're a very physical team, and they have this kind of X factor on the backs. They're all well able to step and offload, and Sanchez is back as well. That seems to kind of start their engine a lot better than other players at 10. So I think it's a tough test. I think their ranking of 10th in the world is ridiculous. You're
not a fan of the world rankings, to be fair?
Pardon?
You're not really a fan of the world rankings?
No, I think there's a lot of anomalies in it now, and I think they have to have them, but they should probably look at them again. There was a time when the world rankings never changed. Like, you'd have to win like 10 tests in a row to get one place up, but they tried to rejig it, I think, about 15 years ago to make it a little more volatile in terms of the changes. But I think sometimes now there's ways you can go up the rankings without playing matches. If you don't play very often, you can find stuff up the rankings. So I think I take those rankings with a grain of salt in certain situations. I'd still think the top 4 or 5 teams deserve to be there. Yeah. And you could argue the toss whether they're one up, one down. But I think Argentina 10th in the world, to me, doesn't make a lot of sense. I think they're a lot better than 10th in the world. Yeah, it's a bit of a farce. Before we let you go, from Joel Smith's perspective, a team similar to the one that played against South Africa? Obviously it won't be the same as the one that we saw against Fiji. Yeah, I think there won't be a ton of changes. I think probably the worrying thing, if he has something to worry about for him, is that I know Rhys Ruddock talked in the build-up to the game about having a game plan and executing it. I thought in the first half what they were doing made sense. They kicked a little bit less than Ireland normally do, which made sense against a team like Fiji, that you'll be more circumspect about your contestables and when you kick the ball. But I thought the second half we just kind of slumped into a very one-dimensional, narrow game, and like we scored 6 points in the second half. Now that's with 70% possession and 75% territory. That's got to be a worry. Like, we still should have been able to break down Fiji with that sort of dominance, and we just weren't able to build enough pressure, hold on to the ball, and our ruck ball became glacially slow, and I think that's one thing Argentina do really well. They'll slow your ruck ball. They are fantastic at it if they can at all. Now the referee will play part in this if he gives them that extra bit of latitude, but that will worry me next weekend, that going into play Argentina, if they slow our ruck ball down like the trap we fell into in the second half against Fiji, it could be a hell of a slog to try and beat them. So I think there are things from a coaching perspective he'll look at it and say, well, how do we keep tempo in our game, and how do we bring more accuracy at the breakdown, and how do we keep the options to go wide when we need to go wide and go direct when we need to go direct. We lost that in the second half on the weekend, albeit with a different team, but I think the philosophy, Joe Smith's philosophy, wouldn't have changed too much between South Africa and Fiji. I don't think he'd change his philosophy in the game. He might have changed small things, small starter plays, as I said, maybe kick a little less to Fiji than you would, but I think he'll have to look at particularly the final third of the field, how effective we can be if we get in there.
Yeah, at a push, will we win the game, do you reckon?
I think we will, yeah, and I think though we'll have to play well to win it. I think we'll have to play well to win it, and if we do play well, we will win it. But if we're a little bit off, we could get caught very easily. I think this Argentinian team as well will see this as a big scalp coming to Dublin. Like, I know they beat Italy in the end, but they've been short on wins this year, and I think for them to finish out with a win against Ireland was certainly something they'd put a lot of stock in, and they're well capable of doing that, as we know. So I wouldn't be relaxed too much about it. I think we'll have to work hard for it, but it's up really kind of in our hands with the players we have and the team we have. If we deliver in terms of our game plan, I think we win, but we'll need to be on the money to do that.
Yeah, we'll have to see how it goes. Eddie, thanks a million. We'll speak to you again next week.
Thanks,
and cheers to you for watching at home. Enjoy yourself during the week. We'll be back on Friday for close calls, and we will have more post-Argentina chat. This time next week. Until then, take care.